Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Ken Miller to talk about engendering your dreams. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.
So, Ken, you have a very unique story, very touching, very motivational at the same time. And I was hoping you could start the conversation by telling people a bit about how your life started and what or how it led to where you are today.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity to share with the audience. I was born October 15th, 1962, so I'm 62 years old at this point. When I was born in 62, I was put up for adoption at birth. And for the first 6 years of my life, I was what they call a foster child in the New York system. And then I was adopted by Irene and Sam Miller when I was 6 years old. And when I was adopted, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't tell time, I couldn't even tie my shoes. I couldn't tell the time on a clock because at the foster homes, they weren't taking time to teach the children that they had under their care as foster children. So I had a lot to learn when I first got adopted with Irene and Sam. My mom sat down and taught me all those things that I needed to do just to catch up as a 6-year-old. Well, of course, I went to school, learned how to read, and I fell in love with reading. When I was 12 years old, moved to Alaska, and that's where I graduated from high school. As a high school student, I was a National Merit Scholar. I was accepted to Harvard. I ended up going to Dartmouth, Ivy League, and did my 4 years at Dartmouth. Graduated from Dartmouth in 1984. And I always tell people I graduated with a degree in fraternity with a minor in history and English, which means I came out of Dartmouth College as an alcoholic and a drug addict. I went to my first treatment center when I got out and stayed clean for a couple of years, went into the corporate world, worked for Kodak, worked for 3M. And then approximately 1988, 89, I relapsed. And within about a year, I was homeless on the streets of Seattle. I ended up for the next 20 years, approximately homeless or in missions or incarcerated. I did 3 prison terms. I did many years behind bars for burglary, for drug sales, and drug possession. 2004, September 22nd, I was arrested for sales of crack cocaine, $10 rock. I was sentenced to 6 years, but was threatened with a habitual criminal statute by a judge in Reno, Nevada. And I was threatened. Next time I came in with a felony, which would have been my 4th one, I was going to be sentenced to 25 to life, no matter what the felony was. I believed him and went to prison for 3 years, and I made some decisions which are real important as my journey goes along. And since that day, September 23rd, 2004, I've been clean and sober. I've not volitionally picked up any drug or mind-altering chemical. I got out of prison in '07 with no skills. And I love telling the story. When I got out, the thing that most surprised me wasn't cell phones. It wasn't any of the other normal things that most people deal with. But I was just blown away by email. Just email. I could not believe there was a thing called email. So I got out. Only thing I can get was blue collar work in a warehouse. Did that for a bit. Then I moved back to Alaska because grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. And I was fortunate enough to get a job as a development director at a food kitchen, which I was very familiar being a client of food kitchens, but now I am the development director fundraiser. Fell in love with fundraising, and within 4 years, I had started my own company, Denali FSP, which I've had since April Fool's Day 2014. And then also, in the meantime, I've done a few other things in the area of being in leadership positions. I've been on many boards, and I've done a lot to give back to the fundraising world and also to give back to my communities, in particular communities of young Black men. That was it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that is an incredible story. And even hearing it for the second time because of our pre-chat, like I'm still blown away by life experience. Just to spend a bit more time on, I'm curious to know a bit more about those decisions in prison that you mentioned. Would you consider that to be a more or less the pivotal moment where you said this can't continue, I have to do something? Or like what were those decisions like? And if you could tell me about that transition moment.
So there probably were three pivots or three transition moments, or a better analogy is three times I came to the Y in the road. Okay, the Y in the road. The first one was September 22nd, 2004, when I was arrested. And when you get arrested, I was arrested by the Reno Street Enforcement Team. It's called the SET team. And they're the ones that deal with the street level drug dealing, things of that nature. So they arrest me for the sales to their undercover of a $10 rock of crack cocaine. I have to wait what is called the paddy wagon. So I'm waiting for the paddy wagon, and I'm, of course, handcuffed behind my back, and I am crying. I am crying profusely. And I remember the cop comes up to me and said, "Why are you crying?" He thought maybe I was hurt or something had happened. And I remember saying to him, "I am crying because I'm going to live." Because I didn't think I was going to live on the streets. I thought I was going to die, either suicide or be killed or drug overdose. And I knew I can do prison. I'd been to prison twice before. I can do prison. And I knew I was going to live. And that was a moment that I can always recollect and think back to as a point where I now had faith again. Okay? I had a modicum of faith that I could live. Okay? How I was going to live or the quality of my life, I wasn't sure at that point. So I go to jail. It takes 3 months to get to prison to be sentenced and all that good stuff. And I remember I'm sitting on the bunk, really laying on the bunk in the unit at this jail called Park Boulevard in Sparks, Nevada. And I'm laying there, and I had a conversation with God. And in that conversation, very simply, what was stated to me is, if you do the right thing, make the right decisions, I'll stand by you and walk you through it. Because sometimes the right decision is painful, or there's discomfort, or it's not what we want to do because we want to do our will. And I heard that and I felt that. And then pretty much the third main decision, when I went into prison, I was going into the same prison for the third time. I went into prison and I said, if I am the same person coming out of prison, because I will be released one day, that I am going in, I'm going to have the same results I had the first two times, which is to return to the street life. And so I said, I need to work on everything. I need to work on physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And I worked on each and every one of those items over the next 3 years. I mean, I literally worked. I knew I needed to, and I worked on each and every one of those items. And with those three decisions or pivot points, it allowed me to be where I'm at today. And I've had one or two other ones, probably a little smaller, but I've had one or two other ones that, again, have brought me to the point today where I'm a successful, and I'm at ease with life. I'm at ease with life. That answer.
You said there was three moments, right? So that was one of them, or was it, because I understood the part that the getting arrested was part one. Part two was the realization going in, if you're going in, the same as going
That
out.
was number three. Number two was laying on the bunk in
Okay.
jail and having a conversation with God.
Got it.
Saying, God says, I will walk with you. Have courage, have faith, and I'll walk you through the discomfort of doing the right thing. For especially a street person or ex-criminal or criminal, sometimes doing the right thing hurts. It's discomforting because that's not the direction you've done for the 40 or 50 other times before that. Okay? Sometimes to not use drugs hurts. It hurts, for a drug addict to not use the drug when you want to. Only thing that's making you is the compulsion, and you don't do it. It's painful, but you want to get to the other side. And it gets easier. It dissipates over time, the compulsion and the obsession. And it did. It took me about 2 years before my obsession and compulsion wore off.
Would you say that these are also the three moments that are like, it's these, so these three moments were pivotal, but it also takes a certain level of introspection, understanding, acceptance, forgiveness to get through this as well. Like, was there any other factors that you can attribute internally or externally that you said, you know what, I have to move on, I have to get past this, and I'm not only have to, but I'm capable of doing it, and I'm going to do it, and I will do it, and I did it. Like, there's a journey there that even some people who are aware of the journey they need to take, like to your point, it's very difficult. You found a way to make that happen. So, is there any, what was that? What was that ability to say, this, I will change, I did change, and I'm happy I changed?
I've thought about this a lot, Alex. Thought about it exactly. And I've always thought about why does not everyone do this? Why did I not do it the first two times? Okay. One is you have to have at least a scintilla, a modicum, a small percentage of belief that you're worthy of good, okay? That you're worthy of having a good life. So many times, if something good happened to me, I would diminish it, mean it, or say it doesn't exist because I'm not a good person. I'm not good. So how dare I have something good happen to me? But at some point, I made a decision that I'm worth it. That this vessel, this entity, almost like a third party looking at myself. Okay. My new book, I have a new book coming out in 2 months. It's called Finding Kin. That's the name of the book. It's Finding Kin. Because I had to find me. See, and this is another thing that was advantageous for me. I came from innocence. I was a really good kid in high school. I was a really good kid in junior high and middle school and elementary. I was a very gentle, nice person. So I knew that world, and I grew up around people who were just good, beautiful people, right? So I had something to reflect on. Many times we come from environments where it's very difficult for us to see good because we're surrounded by negativity, or we grew up in a home of negativity and violence and evil and ugly. And so we don't have anything as a baseline. Well, I had a baseline. I could always think about my mom, and I knew I had a beautiful baseline to base future behavior on. But was I worthy of it? Was I worthy of it? And I made a decision, yes, I am. I'm going to give this another shot. Believe me, when I did this, when I made those decisions, and that was in the first 6 months of me being sober, I didn't know I was going to have 20 years clean and sober, but I knew I was going to try. Let me tell you one more. I wasn't sure I was going to share this one with you, but I'm going to share it with you. I get out of prison after 3 years. I have a gentleman who is, quote unquote, my sponsor in one of the anonymous programs. We sit down to start working the steps. There's 12 steps. And he says to me, I just was released from prison. He says to me, are you willing to go without relationships for a year? And I remember looking at him and I'm like, I just got out of the pen. I want relationships and companionships with women. I've been locked up for 3 years. And I remember looking at him, I don't know how long it took, but I had an internal conversation with Ken. And I'm like, my way didn't work. And here's a gentleman with 28, 30 years sobriety, being clean, giving me direction for good reason, even though I didn't understand it as much at that time. And I remember looking at him and I said, yeah, I can do that. And I did it because my way didn't work. And I needed to be able to trust in another man and in a process. And I did it. And that was a big one for me. Okay.
The acknowledgement that, you know, what someone does doesn't lead to the results that you want, and therefore you need to change it. is not so easy. I know there's a infamous quote. I don't think it's attributed to Einstein, which I don't know if it's true or not. But they say doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is a sign of insanity. But in your it, even as simple as that, or as well known as that, there are still people who fall into that trap. I know a couple of myself actually. So to understand, to recognize that, to say, in order for me to do something, in order for me to have different results, I have to do something different, and trusting someone who externally is not easy. I'm very happy that you were able to achieve that.
Yeah, it's trusting anything. Literally trusting a process, a person, a goal, self. I mean, probably the last person I trust was me. I had a history of breaking promises to self. And you want to meet somebody with lower self-esteem, it's an individual that does not trust their own decision-making capability. And so even at that point, I did not. 3 years clean, I didn't trust me. Because me wanted to go out and have relationships. But I had to trust this other individual, believing that he had my best. On the streets, in the penitentiary, it does not engender trust, just by the nature of that world. Drugs, by nature, there is no trust in drugs because all drugs have the same thing in common. They change your perception of reality. That's what a drug does, whether it's pain in your knee or whether you want to be high. It changes your perception of reality. So therefore, it can't be trusted because it's not truth. And it took me a while to understand this, but I understand that well. And I also understand insanity very well, very well. And insanity is the inability to perceive reality. That's what insanity is. When you're psychotic or paranoid, schizophrenic, or neurotic, you can't perceive what is truth. The CIA is not after you. You do not feel bugs crawling all over your skin. That's not real. But because you've done so many drugs or you're biologically or neurologically insane, whether temporary or permanent, you have the inability to perceive reality. Insanity, this is my definition, is doing the same thing and not caring what the results are. That's insane. Because if it's inimical to your long-term well-being, that's not of God, that's not of truth. That's not why biologically we're put on this earth, is not to kill ourselves. Okay? But my thing is, I would do the same thing. I didn't expect different results when I smoked crack. Could care less about that. But I did not care about me. I didn't care what the results were in many of my actions. That's insane. Because insanity says it's going to affect others. Sanity says it's going to put you in the penitentiary for years. Sanity says it's going to hurt you.
I like your definition more. I might start quoting you instead of Einstein now.
I think it's Santayana, but that's fine.
You mentioned the sponsor, you mentioned your mom. These are obviously people in your life that you were able to look up to, role models. And I know today you are a mentor for, as you mentioned, men in fundraising and in general, men helping them engender their dreams. But I was curious to know, of those two people, are there any other mentors or role models that you used to inspire you?
Oh, yeah. I've always had mentors. So it started off, I had mentors, and then I began mentoring. So I have 4 generations of Black men mentoring. Black men. That's my world. I'm a Black man. And I specifically, I'm interested in that subset of our community, of the world, because I know that community and we have a lot of problems in that community. The most dangerous thing to a Black man is another Black man, period. It's not the cop, it's not white folks, it's not the judge, it's other Black men. That's the most dangerous. But we're a danger to ourselves by our actions and many of the things we do. So how do I break that, whether it's one person or a multitude of people? How do I scale that? So I've had mentors. I have like 4 of them right now. And when I say men, I have official gentlemen, some in fundraising, some outside of fundraising, but they're all men that, and it's a word that's the most important word on the streets. And the most important word on the streets is respect. And these are men I respect.
What was the moment that you decided that to give back, especially in the specifically mentoring? So you've come all this way. You've been able to surpass challenges that a lot of people are not able to surpass. You get the mentorship you're looking for. At what point do you realize, and why do you realize, and what was that moment like when you said, okay, now that I've received what I need to be self-sufficient in many different ways, I therefore want to give back as much as I can? Because was it a carry it forward type of mentality? Was it another inspiration? What was it?
It was inspiration, serendipity. I was awarded what they call like the Presidential Award from the NAACP Anchorage, Alaska chapter. And when I went to get the award, I didn't know I was supposed to speak. Nobody told me that. When they said, hey, Ken, come in, we're going to give you this award. So I go to the banquet, and then I see I'm the last person on the schedule, and I have to speak. So I went up there. I had no speech. So I just went and talked from my heart. And what I said was, you've seen these young men and women walk across the stage, and I want to put a charge out to the audience. Women, work with these young ladies that walked across this, mentor them, support them. Men, reach down to these young men that walked across this stage. And I said, my word is my bond. And I will mentor one of these young men that went across the stage. And then when I got off the stage, I went up to one of the gentlemen named Xavier Mason, who I still mentor to this day. This is back in 2011. I still mentor to this day. And I asked him, you heard what I said? Are you interested in being mentored? He said, yes, Mr. Miller. And we've been mentoring ever since. And once I started it, it's interesting. This is interesting. I don't go out and ask people, can I be your mentor? Well, let me put that back. The majority of the individuals are people who know me and ask me would I mentor their son, nephew, cousin, whatever it may be. Okay, usually older Black women. Then I do a lot of podcasts and panels, things like that. And one time I did a podcast or a panel discussion, and I said, Dan, anybody wants to be mentored? And this was like a national group. And I had like 30 guys. That's how badly Black men are looking for role models and individuals. It's not even a role model so much as somebody to support them on their journey through life. That's how I got started. And I've worked with probably 40 men. Actively, I work with 8 now. As of July, I had 28 men that I work with actively. And I call it explicit contracting, in that we have a verbal contract where I am the mentor, you are the mentee, and I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And in return, all I ask you to do is to show up and be honest. That's it.
Do you believe there's something specific about Black men that creates a need for people to be mentored? Like men in general, are proud. They don't want to perceive themselves as vulnerable. They definitely want other people to perceive themselves as vulnerable. There is a certain vulnerability in seeking a mentor because you're obviously looking for something that you are not capable of, or you need inspiration for, or, guidance and so forth. But is there anything particular about Black men, how they need, is it more or less the same? Is there different nuances to it? Like is there anything specific about that I get the impression in talking to you and a few other people actually in leadership as well, that there is a need that is unfulfilled, that can definitely be improved. So I'm curious to know what your insights are in that respect.
I could talk about this for the next hour.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
So there's a need within the Black male United States community, period. The number one, or one of the main problems, are really 2 problems. One is peer and one is fathers. In the Black community, we don't have enough fathers within the community itself. So the Black male child does not grow up with a true biological father in their world for different reasons. Drug addiction, alcoholism, prison, or we're just acting a fool and we're not going to take our responsibility to be a father to this male child. Then there's the whole cultural where we have to be cool, or we have our peers saying that it's not cool to be intellectual, it's not cool to think, it's not cool to go to college, it's not cool to be a square or to be a nerd, all of the above, okay? And therefore, if you try to climb your way out of the pot, I'm gonna pull you back to the hood. I'm gonna pull you back into the community. I'm gonna pull you back into being cool. You know, I tell people all the time, I'm square. I'm so square, it's ridiculous. I drive an Audi. Okay, I'm square and I'm cool. I used to be really cool and put me in the penitentiary. And I'm not saying you can't be cool and not go to the penitentiary or not act, but there's specific behaviors that you will endeavor to do to be cool, okay? And so within this community, we have this damaged group of young Black men that are killing each other over the predominant thing, and a lot of people misunderstand this. This is my truth. It's not over drugs. It's not over women. It's over respect. That's why we have gang warfare. That's why, we kill, because you said something that diminishes me within my community. Respect is an acknowledgement of a person's position, stature within their community. Think about that. So if I'm in the Alaska Native community, my wife's Alaska Native, and there's a situation, we call them elders. We have an acknowledgement of their position as reaching old age with some wisdom within that Alaska Native community. Therefore, we use the term elder, okay? And we have that in every community. There's communities of the church, there's communities of the street, there's communities of the penitentiary and the prison. And if you do not acknowledge a person's position or stature or do something that disavows their position or stature, we're going to have problems. And the way we manifest our difficulties and our pain and our diminishing of self within our communities on the streets and in the penitentiaries through violence. Unfortunately, how we do it. So within our community, young Black men, we have some problems. We know about the incarceration rates. We know about kids out of wedlock. We know about drugs and alcohol. It's nothing I'm not saying that's new in those and what the problems are. I'm more about what is the solution. So I work with guys one-on-one, and one of my key things right now is how do I scale the message? How do I empower more men to then scale the message that you can be a successful Black male within our society today? And we have to define success, and we can do that one-on-one for each individual. But how do we that? And then how do we give it back? Or how do we continue it or scale it so more people hear that voice? There's not enough of us talking, not enough of us sharing this message as successful Black men. Because then many times we become successful Black men and we leave that world, or we leave wanting to help. And I'm not saying every successful Black man has to help other Black men. And I say Black men, but it really is communities of color. I mean, I work with like a Puerto Rican gentleman, and I think I even got a Polish guy. But it is communities of marginalized communities. But it's 95% African American.
As you're mentoring these individuals, you said about 40 to 50 so far, what do you notice as, like, they come to you because, well, I guess we can answer that question. What is the main reason why they are coming to you? What are they hoping to achieve? And what do you typically, or how do you typically start them on the journey? What do you, is there questions you ask? Do you do an assessment of some kind? How do you generally start a mentoree relationship?
Well, we don't use the word assessment. That's not in my community. But so a couple of things. How do they come? Remember, usually it's a third party that knows what I have to offer. Okay. And so they come in most of the time, not that they don't want to be there, even though I've had a few of those, but they come in somewhat curious because this is unusual. Okay. And in some communities, they will run back to their boys, their partners, and say, hey, I got a new mentor. That person would look at scams because they don't have that. Or if they do have a mentor, it's the wrong mentor. You can be a mentor and be a drug dealer and mentor young guys coming up. I could be a burglar and a mentor, but that's not what I do. I mentor in God's world or the good. So every man that I've worked with I've worked with the same way for the last 14 years, but I've modified it because you learn things over time, what works better. First of all, one of the first things I had to learn is not every person is the same. And I say that and I always go into the mentor relationship and I say to myself, I've got to meet them where they're at. Some of my guys are much more intellectual. Some of my guys are much more courageous. Some of my guys are much more understanding. Some of my guys are much more spiritual. ... I got to meet them where they're at. Okay. But first thing I say to every man that I've ever mentored, and someone will hear this, first thing I always say to them, what's your dream? Not only do I say, what is your dream? But I say, I will give you time to think about it. Because sometimes, many times, we want to answer questions quickly. We think it's like an extemporaneous speech. It's not. And I tell the guy, think about it. I'm just going to drink my coffee or I'm going to sit here on the Zoom meeting. Take your time. Because I tell them I have one goal as your mentor, and that's to engender dreams. So what's your dream? And not only that, this is important, Alex. I say to them, I give you permission to dream. I give you permission because there have been people who have taken away their permission to dream. It could be their brothers, sisters, siblings, mom, dad, school, partners, homeboys. But I give you permission. I don't do that a lot, but there's times where I'd say, I will give you permission to do this. And then they sit back. I've never had one not. But I've had guys sit there for like 5 minutes because they're like, I can dream? I'm allowed to dream? I mean, and they're like almost in shock. And then they sit there, and then they'll share. And we've changed a few dreams along the way. That's fine. Let's get started. So once I do that, I would tell them what I do. What's my role? And I tell them, first of all, it may take time to build trust. I'm cool with that. This is open-ended. Until you want to let go of me, this is open-ended. Number one. Number two, I will introduce you to people. I will introduce you to information, and I will empathize, sometimes sympathize, wherever you're at emotionally. That's real important. To have another man empathize with another man, another black man, adult, empathize is important because a lot of times they haven't had that. They haven't had that. I didn't have that. My father, we didn't even talk about that. My father shot my mom 6 times in 1985. So I was not close to my dad. Okay? You can say I was not close to him. I didn't have a black male figure, older, that I could reach out to and just talk about how I feel. 21, 22 years old. It's a bad place to be. Okay? I got my guys who are 21, 22 too, but I need people with life experience. So anyway, I will sit down and then we always start off with two books, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey and The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. I am a big one. And it's interesting because some of my guys haven't read a book in a while. And it may take them 6 months, 8 months to get through the first book. I'm cool with that. Read a chapter, read a paragraph. Let's talk about it. Because the one thing every guy I've ever worked with will tell you, I will make you, I will give you an environment which I will have you think. Because so many times we don't think. We literally don't think. So I do a lot of sentence completion, sentence insertion. I do a lot of definition. What does that mean? What does courage mean? What does hope mean? And this is probably, it took me about 3 or 4 years. But I tell all my guys I love them. Do you know how hard it is for a black man? I hate to use the word, but a hetero black man tell another black man that he loves them? And I do. I love my guys. Yeah, you can't hear it in my voice. Like, I know people can't see me, but listen to my voice. I love my guy, and I tell him. And if I have 8 guys, probably 6 or 7 will say they love me back. There's 1 or 2. Again, they've been programmed. They can't say that. Or maybe they don't believe that or understand at the level I'm talking about, that filial love, brotherly love of you. And so, and I do a lot more with them, but we're not to get into too many details about that. I mean, the things I do financially to support them, you know, if I'm talking about for like conferences and trips and stuff like that, that'll grow them. And then, yeah, I've done a lot in that area too. We'll just leave it at that.
It's I've actually seen it, and it can sympathize. I've always confused those two words, sympathize. But the idea is, imagine the profound impact that has to hear brotherly love being shared. Because you're right, even as a guy too, we don't do this very often, and yet we don't even allow ourselves. And we don't, we feel like it's the vulnerability is a weakness. But in most times, I've learned over time that it's actually a strength, and that takes a lot of time to get through to understand that. So I can understand the profound impact that it has on people. I'm also curious to know. And you kind of touched upon a couple of them, but are there any particular roadblocks that people have? It seems to be more of a mindset thing that they've never been allowed a moment to actually dream, to have a dream. Would you say that would be the most typical roadblock people have? Or is it something smaller or maybe a bit different? Like,
No.
What is their main obstacle?
The main roadblock of almost every human is self-talk. Self-talk. I can tell you, you're the greatest guy, Alex, I've ever met. The best podcaster, best interviewer. I mean, I can say that to you, but if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. You'll diminish it. You'll deprecate it. I've always said this a lot of times when I'm teaching. I'll say this. I teach a class on self-esteem. I said, I can know more about your self-esteem by how you take a compliment than by how you take a criticism. Okay? And so I'm dealing with these gentlemen, and I'm just going to put it out there. We're all damaged, some more than others. When I went into that penitentiary, or when I went into that jail on September 22nd, 2000, I was so damaged in all areas. Remember I said I had 4 areas I had to clean up. Most of the time we're only damaged in 1 or 2, but I had 4. Physically, mess. Emotionally, intellectually. I tell people when I went to prison, I would read a paragraph in a book, and I could not tell you what the first sentence said by the time I got to the end of the paragraph. My brain couldn't even remember. My vocabulary had shrunk. I had a lot of swear words, but it had shrunk. Literally, the brain, because I wasn't using it intellectually. I was dealing off of emotion, predominantly fear. Okay. So when I'm working with these gentlemen, their main thing is that they've heard for so long that you're not worthy, that you're not competent, that don't even try because it won't happen. You have that dream, you have that aspiration, that's your mountaintop. Man, you must be out your mind. You know, nobody from this family's done that. Nobody's got an advanced degree. Nobody's made over 50,000 a year. Well, how dare you? And so that's coming external. We internalize that, and then we have this self-talk that says, no, I can't. Remember, my thing is to engender dreams. So a lot of it is, let's put together a plan. Let's talk about a plan. You got an interview coming up. Let's practice the interview. I've done a lot of interviews. Yeah, I've been on the panels. I've hired people. One of the things I do as a coach is I work with nonprofits to hire people. So I know what happens in the interview room. So let's practice. Okay? And not only that, when you get done with that interview, call me and let's talk about it. Let's debrief. Let's take away the fear. Okay? Because you can do it, bro. And even if you don't get the job, it's the practice. I spent a lot of time talking about courage. And I spent a lot of time talking about truth when I work with the guys. Alex, I just put this out here. And this, because this is me. I'm good at mentoring. How do you know you're good, Ken? Because number one, the guys stay with me. Number two, I've had grown Black men sit in front of me on Zoom or in person with tears in their eye because their dream came true. Something they never thought they could do. And I'm saying it's not because of me. It's because I've journeyed with them. You did, and I'm just all I heard, hey man, awesome. Where do you want to take it now? What's the new dream? We can stay with that one and just grow it. Or do you want to go into another endeavor, another company, another, da. So, I mean, like I said, I'm good at it. I'm good at it. But this is the problem, Alex. I'm only one person. 28, it wasn't killing me, but that's 28 guys I have to give an hour. I moved it to once every 3 months because I couldn't handle it once a month. It's 28 hours over usually a 4-day period that all I do is back-to-back meetings. I always have a topic. So when we meet, this is great. You asked this question. I meet my guys for 1 hour. The first thing we do, every single guy, if you were to talk to one of my mentees today, would say, oh, Ken always starts off, tell me about a win. I always start them, tell me about a win, a success, an accomplishment. Because sometimes they'll start off because they have a concern or a problem. I say, well, you know how we start? Come on. Oh yeah, a win. And they always do. I've never had a guy not give me a win. And then I always have a topic, but usually we'll talk about a half hour, 40 minutes about where they're at, whatever concerns, challenges they have. And then we talk about a topic. And when I had 28, I would talk to 28 guys about the same topic. And believe me, by the time I was in 6 or 7 guys, I knew that topic well on my end. The best way to learn is to teach. So we'll have a topic on respect. We'll have a topic. We did one was really good on discernment. What is discernment? Not maturity, but discernment. And we just talk about that one word. And I do that with 28 guys or 8 guys that I have now. And then we wrap up. And then I go on to my next one.
It's super clear that you're very passionate and fascinated and invested in these individuals. I mean, there's a lot of comments I could make, but I'm also looking at the clock, so I'll have to start winding down. But I wanted to throw out there, it's interesting from a psychological perspective how we as people are much more susceptible to criticism than compliments in general. We will internalize criticism and deflect compliments generally. Not all of us
are good
at taking them. And yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's evolutionary. Okay? And a criticism is something that's negative. Okay? And as an organism, and I just learned this a few years back, anything that's negative has about a 40% stronger feeling than something positive. And the reason is it was to protect us. Negative could kill us, and then the species doesn't continue on, okay? Positive is great, makes us happy, maybe we procreate or whatever, but it's not as important to understand that that saber-toothed tiger is running after you, okay? So that is why negative is stronger. But again, once you know that and other information, and I would ask everybody who's listening is to, how do you take a compliment? How do you take it? Think about it. How do you take a compliment? Because what we do is we think it's in, our self-talk says we're this level, and you just said, I'm this level higher. There's friction, okay? And that friction causes individuals to have angst, and then usually to try to diminish it. Oh, no, that was the team, whatever.
Well, I usually say thank you and keep it simple like that when I receive a compliment. But I totally agree about the evolutionary perspective as well. Our brains were adapted and evolved to be threat machines, threat assessment machines. I'm using the word assessment again, but the idea that we're always looking for fear, because to your point, it's survival. So our brain has evolved to look for threats and not to look for compliments. I was wondering, you talked about, you sounds like you also have a scaling problem, right? You 28 people, there's only so many hours in the day. You also have other work to do. You've got, companies and books and all that kind of stuff. So I was wondering if you had any insights or ideas of how you intend to tackle it, or any other kind of future endeavors that you hope to accomplish in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so that has been my plan this year. Really, I made the decision, because it comes down to a decision, not a choice. Choice is what we have. Decisions are what we make. And I made a decision in July to go all in at age 62 into speaking across this country, sharing stories and sharing hope and sharing resilience. So to do that, I needed to free up time. That is why I let go of 44 volunteer commitments that I had at that point. Again, I still have my 8. I have no organization. And so now I am in the process of responding to RFPs to speak, and also allowing serendipity to happen. My key thing is just getting in front of people and people hearing me. Hopefully, if there's someone who hears me on this and is interested in what I've said, reach out to me. And, let's see if we can engage. And again, it's not all for pay. Sometimes I get paid to speak, but many times I speak for free, just so I can share the message. And I have a good message. I do it well. And, I just look forward. I think next year is going to be phenomenal. I don't even know what's coming, but I know I have a message, and I know I have the capability to deliver that message. And I have a strong spiritual foundation that says that this is going to happen. Okay.
And you're a fascinating person. I know we could talk for multiple hours longer, but I do want to respect their time and the allocated time that we have. So how do people get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out for more questions? What's the best way to do so?
The best way to do it is one of 2 different ways. One is to go to my website, which is very simple, kenmillerspeaks.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is Ken Miller 84. Just go, LinkedIn and then Ken Miller 84. I'm that Ken Miller. That's the year I graduated from Dartmouth, was 1984. So Ken Miller 84, LinkedIn, or kenmillerspeaks.com. And you can send me a message there.
Ken, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for the hard work that you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for having this podcast. Truly, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little of my story. But truly, you have the podcast. I don't have a podcast. Don't think I'm going to get one. But you've taken the time, the energy, the capacity to build this podcast. I just wish you all the success. And thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak.
It's my pleasure. I mean, this is a labor of love. This is the reason why I do what I do. So it's, but thank you.
Awesome.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.